Picture it. The most electrifying player in women's basketball, someone who months ago was draining logo threes over outstretched defenders, is now bent over at half court, hands on her knees, face twisted in pain. The crowd goes quiet, not the polite quiet of a free throw, but the real kind, where people hold their breath because something feels genuinely wrong. That moment happened 4 separate times this season in under 2 months. And each time, the Indiana Fever gave the same answer. Day to day, minor discomfort, she's progressing well. The basketball world nodded, moved on, and waited for an update that never really came. But there's more going on here than a physical story. It's a story about power, who has it, who's abusing it, and what gets sacrificed when a league decides a player's marketability matters more than her body. By the time Clark went down against Connecticut, people paying close attention had already spotted something the injury reports were avoiding. This wasn't bad luck. It was a cascade. It started with the left quad, described as tightness, managed with rest, then the left groin, then the right groin, then, before anyone could process it, the same region flared again on the opposite side under a completely different stress angle. Outside orthopedic specialists have a name for this: compensatory injury cycling. When one part of the body is damaged and doesn't get proper recovery time, the surrounding muscles absorb extra load to protect it, and that overcompensation eventually breaks down somewhere else. A domino effect disguised as bad luck, one that only stops with real, complete rest. What Clark got instead was managed minutes and reassurance, specialists reviewing only the public footage and timeline without access to her actual medical records, say this pattern isn't consistent with a day-to-day classification at all. Realistic recovery from this kind of cumulative soft tissue damage is measured in weeks, not days, and only with full removal from competition, travel, and promotional duties. Instead, Clark kept crossing time zones, playing heavy minutes, and smiling for the cameras. Warning signs were embedded in her situation before the season even started. Clark came into her rookie year having added significant muscle mass in the offseason. Understandable, given how much more physical the WNBA is than college ball. But adding muscle mass without a carefully integrated movement adaptation process can quietly disrupt an athlete's biomechanics. Stride length, hip positioning, the angles at which knees and ankles absorb force, even a shooting release, can shift when the supporting muscle groups are proportioned differently than before. Clark's movement patterns, built over a lifetime, were subtly disrupted by a body that was technically stronger, but biomechanically still in transition. Then came the WNBA schedule. No easy entry point, back-to-back games across time zones, layered with the press junkets, sponsor appearances, and national spotlight that came specifically with being Caitlin Clark, on top of an already brutal physical load. One biomechanics specialist put it plainly: change a high-level athlete's movement foundation, then immediately throw them into elite competition without an adaptation buffer, and you're running a finely tuned engine on the wrong fuel. It doesn't fail right away, it might even run well for a while, but the wear accumulates invisibly until the system can't absorb anymore. That moment arrived 4 times this season, and the Fever acted surprised each time. What stopped people wasn't the mechanics of the injury. Athletes get hurt. What stopped people was her reaction. Clark, who had been playing through visible discomfort for weeks without letting a grimace linger, came off that court looking like something had genuinely broken. She bent forward, heading to the bench, and on the sideline came real tears, the kind that show up when frustration, fear, physical pain, and exhaustion all hit at once, and there's nowhere left to put it. The Fever's official language: slight discomfort. That phrasing isn't accidental. It manages expectations without closing doors, keeps sponsors calm, avoids triggering clauses that might mandate a longer absence, and keeps the product on the floor. If a top 5 NBA player broke down 4 times in 2 months and cried on the bench, there would be specialist press conferences and accountability questions. What Clark got was a press release written like a weather update. Here's the key development. Clark is no longer relying solely on the Fever's medical staff. She and her team are reportedly assembling an independent group of specialists, professionals with no organizational ties and no incentive to downplay what they're seeing. Biomechanical evaluators, regenerative medicine consultants typically associated with NBA and Olympic-level recovery, soft tissue specialists who treat injury as a structural problem to solve, rather than something to patch and push through. The treatments reportedly being explored go beyond the fever's standard protocols: biomechanical retraining to correct the movement imbalances that started the chain of injuries, and therapies aimed at accelerating tissue repair and reducing inflammation. This isn't recovery, it's a full reset, an acknowledgement that the approach taken so far didn't just fail, it made things worse. When a player of this caliber builds medical infrastructure entirely outside her own organization, that signal can't be walked back. Trust that fractures at this level doesn't repair itself with a good week of practice and an upbeat press release. To understand why the Fever handled this the way they did, you have to understand what Clark represents to them, not as a player, but as a financial asset. Her jerseys rank among the league's best-selling. Her presence in the lineup has a measurable effect on ticket sales, viewership, and attendance, unlike anything the WNBA has seen from a single player. Sponsors build campaigns around her availability. Networks structure broadcasts assuming she'll play. So when her body signals it needs real rest, the organization doesn't experience that as a medical issue first, it experiences it as a business emergency. Every missed game is a ticket sold specifically to see her. Every limited week is a sponsor activation losing its anchor. This is the machine that produces the language of slight discomfort, not malice exactly, but negligence, the institutional reflex of an organization whose commercial interests have become structurally entangled with one player's body. It's notable how few voices around the league have forcefully stood up for Clark specifically. Veterans who spent careers grinding through similar mismanagement should recognize this pattern, yet the response has stayed mostly muted, occasional supportive gestures, nothing coordinated. Part of the explanation, Clark didn't arrive like a typical rookie. She came in with endorsement deals and national media attention most veterans never see across an entire career. That creates real friction, a quiet tension between players who built this league in relative anonymity, and the player who instantly became its most visible, most commercially valuable face. None of this is Clark's fault. She didn't design the system, but she's caught in the center of it, and paradoxically, she's the one it fails the most. There's a version of this season where things play out very differently. When the quad injury happened in the early weeks, the right response was clear. Full shutdown, 2 to 3 weeks of complete rest, immediate access to top specialists regardless of cost or schedule. A rehab protocol that doesn't just treat the injury but investigates why it happened, and corrects it before returning to competition. What Indiana did instead reads like a case study in mismanagement. She was back on the court before tissue had healed. Minute restrictions were applied inconsistently, and health updates were timed to minimize alarm rather than maximize transparency. Clark's camp noticed and quietly built the parallel infrastructure described above. When that kind of separation starts happening between a player and her organization, it's not just a warning, it's a clock, and it's already ticking. Rookie contracts don't last forever. When Clark reaches free agency, she may be the most sought-after player in league history, not just for her game, but for what her presence does to every commercial metric a franchise cares about. Teams like the New York Liberty and Las Vegas Aces are already mentioned for their infrastructure and player-first culture. And then there's Nike, with enormous incentives to see her profile maximized on the biggest stages. If the Fever want to keep her, they need to show through action, not press releases, that her long-term health matters more than any single game or merchandise quarter. They need to build something around her instead of just building on top of her, and they're running out of time to do it. What league leadership seems to have underestimated? The fan base Clark helped bring into women's basketball isn't passive. These fans read injury reports the way analysts read financial filings, dissect footage frame by frame for a changed gate or a favored side, and clip, timestamp, and share every moment that doesn't match the official story. Those tools are free, widespread, and used by a deeply motivated audience. The credibility gap created by consistently understating Clark's situation isn't hypothetical. It's real erosion of trust. Fans who feel deceived don't go neutral. They start assuming the worst about everything the organization says, retroactively, and going forward. Zoom out, and this isn't really a story about one player and one bad decision. It's a story about a professional league at an inflection point, where the gap between what it claims to be and what it actually delivers to its athletes has become too visible to hide. The growth of recent years is real. The TV deals, the attendance numbers. But a league that wants to stand alongside the biggest names in sports can't keep running on infrastructure built for a much smaller operation. Medical standards, travel conditions, and injury reporting all need to catch up. Caitlin Clark became the face of this reckoning, not because she asked for it, but because her arrival made everything already broken impossible to ignore. She's a generational talent who also became, unintentionally, a mirror held up to a league deciding whether it liked what it saw. What's happening off the court now? The independent medical team, the outside specialists, the quiet reclaiming of control over her own health isn't a story of defeat. It's the story of an elite competitor who sees the problem clearly and is solving it on her own terms, without waiting for permission. The comeback is coming, but on her timeline, not anyone else's. And when it happens, the version of her stepping back on the court will have been through something most athletes never face: a full reckoning with the systems that were supposed to protect her and didn't. The WNBA knows exactly what it needs to do. The only question is whether they'll do it before Clark makes the decision for them.